You are listening to Faithless Brewing, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the Spike Rogue. Each week we design new decks for tournament play. We put our creations to the test and share our findings on the air. Coming up on the Brew session, new decks with Vivien's Arkbow and Getaway Car. Then on the Flashback, testing results with Heart of Kiran, Rielle the Everwise, Humble Defector, and Ugin's Nexus. All that and more is coming up on Faithless Brewing. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Faithless Brewing Podcast. I am David Robertson and I am joined by the CEO of the Faithless Brewing Podcast. He is Cavedan Online. He is Dr. Daniel Schriever. Dan, the man, what is going on, my friend?
Doing great, David. Happy Monday to you.
Happy Monday to you as well. We're all surviving. We all made it through the weekend. Although, of course, we record this a little before the release date, so perhaps you guys were all destroyed by a yet unseen meteorite. No one's listening to this except for the aliens.
I'm trying to imagine my mental state a couple days from now. Manifest a happy Monday for me.
Yeah, there you go. Love it. That's the kind of optimism that's going to suffuse this entire podcast. Imagining a more beautiful world that we all live in together.
I don't know if you're just talking about our mission in general or these specific cards we're talking about today, but both are extremely true.
It should be both. So, yeah, today we are going to, first of all, we've been playing a bunch of different lists, a bunch of different brews. I've been experimenting with a bunch of different ideas in Pioneer. We've kind of not gotten to revisit some of those. Some of the decks were successful, some were less successful. We also want to talk about some of the also-rans, right? So we are in our second co-brewing experiment with the Serum Visions podcast, the card that won the People's Poll, Resurgent Belief. We talked about on Friday's podcast, and we're going to continue experimenting with for this entire month. But we don't want to forget the also-rans. The people that might have won had the vote count been correctly audited. And those cards are Vivien's Arkbow and Getaway Car, which was a close finisher, I believe, in the previous poll. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, Getaway Car came in 5th, I think, in the previous month.
Getaway Car is a miscongeniality. Shoutouts to Sandra Bullock.
There's a deep cut there. You were trolling me for a 13 going on 30 reference in the last episode. Now you're quoting a miscongeniality to me.
I haven't seen 13 going on 30. I haven't seen miscongeniality. That's not for me. That's a different target market.
I haven't seen 13 going on 30 for at least a month. But it was on recently. It's a pretty good show, pretty good flick.
Who's the 13-year-old that she switches bodies with?
Herself.
Oh.
She just wakes up one day and is 30. She's 30, flirty, and thriving.
I get it. So it's like Big, but instead of one of the great charismatic stars of all time and Tom Hanks, we have Jennifer Garner.
That's bait. I'm not going to respond to that. How dare you besmirch Jennifer's name?
Shoutouts to Big, though. Let's do a deep dive on Big one of these episodes. They find a fortune-telling robot at a state fair that apparently can control how old you are, and no one just ever mentions it again. Meanwhile, this kid hooked up with a 35-year-old professional, and she's still friends with him. I don't know what's going on there. We need a deep dive on Big, the moral ambiguity.
Maybe I've never seen this movie because that does not ring a bell at all.
You haven't seen Big? What the hell's going on around here?
This is the one where he's a kindergartner who dates his preschool teacher or something.
No, he's like a 12-year-old who's kind of slow to develop, and then he makes a wish at this Zoltar machine and wishes that he was big, and he wakes up and he's Tom Hanks, so he's a 28-year-old dude in a man's body. His mom freaks out because there's this like strange man in her house, and he has to like convince his best friend it's him. And then he goes and works at a toy store, and because of his like childlike wonder, he wins over the CEO with his sort of vision of how toys should be sold.
Okay, maybe I have seen that.
Anyway, he starts dating like kind of a cynical corporate, career woman. They have like a really uncomfortable love scene. And if you're imagining a 12-year-old, how long could that have lasted? 20 seconds?
Wow.
13 seconds?
Okay, so definitely not a 6-year-old who becomes 28. A 12-year-old, totally different thing. That's fine.
Well, it's 13 going on 30. I feel like the ages must almost be identical. I feel like they just said, let's make big, and we just reverse the... sometimes they make a very similar movie, but it's like an all-black cast instead, and it creates different tensions. This is just a female version of Big.
I think that came out first, though. I'm pretty sure that 13 going on 30 came out first.
I think Big came out in like 1986. I don't know if Jennifer Garner had been born yet.
86. By the way, David, I gotta say... So you had mentioned a couple of weeks ago in our mailbag segment that you had these old lists of movies. You went searching for them, haven't turned up yet, which is a shame, but you did put together, as promised, an initial list of underrated flicks from the 1990s. I think you had 13 on there.
I did, yes. My goal was to do 13 for the 90s, 13 for the 00s. What are we calling them? The aughts? The naughties? I don't know what we call them.
The aughts, the 00s, 007s.
And then the 10s, or the teens, or whatever you want to call those. It turns out that it was really hard to compile a list for the 10s because basically the film industry as we know it started to collapse in 2015. But I might get to 13 there. And then in the 00s, I had so many, I think I've got like 20. So I'll have additional lists for the 2 decades following the 90s. But for right now, the 90s list, as Dan is saying, is posted in Discord.
So was that meant to be like top 13, or is this just 13 you liked that met the criteria? I think you'd said couldn't have been nominated for any Oscars and also grossed less than 50 million domestically, I think.
Yeah, so these are what I consider to be like legitimately great films. Not like movies I kind of liked, or, these are movies you should check out, or the movies that fell through the cracks. These are legitimately great films that I don't think most people have seen. And I tried to also play pretty fair, like, in America, none of Miyazaki's movies have grossed a lot, but I feel like a lot of Magic players know a lot about anime, right? So I did not recommend, one of my favorite movies from the 90s is Princess Mononoke. And the American gross of that is actually very small. But I feel like most people, and maybe the target market of Magic is a lot of like young men who like animation, have probably seen Princess Mononoke. So I did not recommend it as like a quote unquote like an unearthed gem. But if you made me create my top 10 list of the 90s, for sure Princess Mononoke would be in the top 2 or 3 because it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, your list was like sophisticated, I think, but it was also still like very dudely. There were no chick flicks on there, and it made me think like, did you not grow up with like a big sister or anything?
I did, but she loved the sort of big, broad movies that were pitched to women.
Okay, so like just Titanic a bunch of times.
I think her favorite movie of all time is 16 Candles. So, that was a movie she made me watch with her when I was young. And I didn't quite get as much out of it as she did.
Okay, fair enough.
Also, I think it's worth noting, right now, I think we've got a way more diverse filmmaking crew than we ever have, right? There's all kinds of, minority creators of TV shows and film and everything. That's the only positive output of the streaming era, in my opinion, is we finally get to hear from many more diverse creative persons. The problem in the 90s, though, is that the vast majority of people that were being selected to tell stories were white men. So the best movies were going to be made by white men because they're the only people who are getting to make movies. So most of the movies I selected are made from a male perspective because the vast majority of filmmakers were male. We literally only had the first Power of the Dog, right? The director Jane Campion was the only female director to ever be nominated twice. That just happened in 2022. It's ridiculous when you think about it.
I did not realize that. Well, yeah, I saw there's a League of Their Own getting spun off into a series on Amazon Prime that's launching this week, actually. So pretty excited for that one. Smash hit from 1992. Not underrated, properly rated, I think.
Yes, I think the beginning of Tom Hanks' incredible run, and Penny Marshall definitely deservedly dined out on that movie for many a decade afterwards. I don't know if he even made like only 2 or 3 more movies. It's like, all right, I just nailed it. Madonna was like somehow likable on screen. That's an accomplishment.
She was great. I mean, it was like
she was awesome.
Perfect movie.
Yeah. Shout out to Penny Marshall. Rest in peace.
I'm hoping that the new series doesn't butcher this, but it's got Abby from Broad City, so
it's gonna be worse than the movie. I mean, when we cannibalize old properties, cannibalize is the word we're using very intentionally.
I watched the trailer, and every single scene in the trailer was a scene that happened in the original movie. So they're basically just taking the movie and stretching it out into a bunch of episodic series. That's fine. I'm here for it. Just give me a longer version of it.
So yeah, if you're looking for movies that are like almost everyone I recommend is pretty dark, pretty edgy, deals with one of the topics that I'm very interested in, which is just like, what does it mean to be a human being? Which I think is kind of like the purview of important films. I have 13 recommendations from the 90s that you might not have seen, right? So if you're looking for something kind of different, when you watch these movies, don't have your phone on, don't have a different browser window up on your computer.
Oh, suddenly my father is on the podcast with me.
Watch the movie for real, man. If you don't demand a lot of yourself when you watch art, then you can't demand a lot of the art that you consume. That's how I feel about it. If you just want to like listen to music while you're like, lifting weights or going for a run, that's fine. But then don't be like, oh man, why aren't there better bands today? It's like, you're the reason.
Yeah, it's the same as listening to Magic podcasts. Get yourself in a meditative state, clear your mind, deep breaths, focus on the cards, see the brews.
Yeah, float in water, in a chamber with no light. And we're going to talk about Getaway Car for 20 minutes.
Yeah, so we got some suspect ones on here. These decks will not be as good as the movies that David is recommending, but that's fine. We're here for the journey. We're here for the experiment. And the first card we want to talk about is the runner-up in this latest round of voting. Vivien's Arkbow. It's from Morde the Spark. 1 and a green legendary artifact. Its only text is an activated ability. Pay X, tap it, and discard a card. Look at the top X cards of your library. You may put a creature card with converted mana cost X or less from among those cards onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So I gotta say, David, I don't see what Morde sees in this card. I know he was very high on this. He rallied the troops. I mean, this almost overtook Resurgent Belief. A lot of people are excited about Vivien's Arkbow, and I do not understand why. So can you enlighten me?
Yeah, so I also agree with you. I remember reading this card the day it was spoiled, and all the notes under it were, this card is broken, this card is, whatever. There's been lots of green cards at Search, right? We're talking about Green Sun Zenith. We're talking about, what's the band 4-mana artifact in Modern?
Birthing Pod. There's the green X card that was played in Devoted Druid. This was getting comparison to all these cards. The green X card at the time was very, very good because Devoted Druid was the best card in Modern. The best deck in Modern. So Vivien's Arkbow, I was just like so excited to read it based on all these comments. And I looked at it, I was like, what the hell? Like, you have to discard a card. You don't ever get to cheat on mana because you have to pay the mana cost of the creature. And then you might miss. Or you might spend 6 mana and only hit a 3-mana creature. So yeah, it's really an interesting card. It asks a very interesting question of you, but how to break it is really tricky. I think the reason that he might be excited about it is he is the master of these sort of creature tutor packages in his 80-card Urian list, where he finds these key creatures. He ends up with a ton of mana, and then this just goes looking for that key piece, right? And in Modern, there's certain individual creatures that are so powerful against certain decks, right? And this is a card that kind of helps your consistency trying to find that, which is one of the big weaknesses of Urian, that, maybe you don't see your sideboard cards as often. That probably is why he likes it, but it's not a tutor, right? It doesn't search, and I can't get past that.
No, and when you read people's description, they talk about it like it's a tutor. It's like, oh man, you play this on 2, then you just leave your mana open, and you just like, hit a Reflector Mage when they play a creature. It's like, yeah, if Reflector Mage is in your top 3, what if it isn't?
Right, so everything we're doing with the Arkbow requires us to have like a certain creature density, pretty high density of creatures. And not only that, but they have to be at the right mana costs because you can only grab a creature that CMC is less than or equal to what you paid. Right, so by definition, you're just never going to get a deal on the creature. You might be overpaying, exactly as David's saying. You might whiff. It's like a collected company on a stick, but you only get one creature at a time. You're paying a lot for it, and you're possibly getting nothing.
Yeah, you're selling me on it now, though.
Well, I just want to get all that out of the way because we're going to talk up the card now and like actually,
yes.
clear away the debris and try to build something from the ashes. But I just want to like get that off my chest before saying nice things about the Arkbow.
Yes.
So what does Arkbow actually do for us? Like, what's the advantage?
So the thing I like about it is it comes down very early. So it gets under counter spells, and against certain decks, especially I want to point out, Red-Black is not playing Culligan's Command anymore. So if this resolves, you're going to be able to turn any random card into the best creature in the top X cards of your deck. So I'm thinking about it from a Pioneer perspective. It comes down before counter magic, and then none of the creatures it puts into play are susceptible to counter magic. And it's a permanent that right now, other than blue-white getting to play, 4 of Portable Hole, there's not a lot of ways to actually destroy it that are currently being played in the format.
So as an engine piece, it's reliable-ish, right? You go out of your way to build your deck around it. You can at least imagine that it will stay in play. That's a start.
And the thing I like about it is normally you say, all right, I'm building around this card, but it sucks that it's legendary. What if I draw a second one? This gives you the out, right? This is built in. I'm going to turn that second Vivien's Arkbow. I'm confident my opponent can't destroy it, right? They're playing mono blue spirits. I'm confident that it's going to stay in play. I just turn that second Vivien's Arkbow into, I pay 4 mana and tap this Arkbow, chuck that one, and see what the top 4 of my library, knock on your library and see what you can find.
That's the power of the card, right? This trading whatever the worst card in your hand is for the best creature in the top of your deck based on how much mana you have to spend. And that's powerful, right? That's like a looting, sometimes better than a looting, right? If playing at instant speed, if getting around counter spells is relevant or valuable, if you're going to play a long game where you're drawing a lot of lands, Arkbow makes sure you're adding to the board every single turn.
And if there are creatures in Pioneer or Modern that are really good in certain matchups, this looks through your deck a chunk at a time, right? If there's a 3 mana creature you're looking for and you've got 4 mana up, you get to look at your top 4 on your turn plus your draw. And then you get to look at your top 4 on your next turn plus your draw. So, I mean, you're talking about getting to cycle through a third of your deck in very few turns if there's a key card that actually stops your opponent. I'm not just saying a card that's good, right? It has to be, whatever it would be, a Thalia type effect against, a Xerox list or whatever it might be. A way to hate graveyard against, a dredge type of list. So if you can find the right creatures that are really good against certain archetypes, this does find them relatively quickly. When you get to 4 or 5 mana, you're looking at 6 cards a turn, your draw plus the top 5 of your deck or whatever.
Yeah, so you can see based on what we're describing that we're basically imagining that as long as Arkbow is in play, you're going to spend as much mana as you can just on the Arkbow. So that means you probably shouldn't have too many other cards in your deck that require additional mana investment. You want to leave your mana free for doing this Arkbow thing every turn. Do you want to build in specific synergies with the Arkbow? Am I trying to use this as a discard outlet? Or am I trying to just trade a bad card for a creature?
I was interested in the discard outlet aspect. I was trying to find is there actual a creature in Pioneer that is a resurrection effect? I think in Modern you could think about the one with Echo, 3 white. It's 2/2 pro black flying.
Yeah, Karmic Guide.
Yeah, a Karmic Guide like effect. I couldn't find a card that was even close to playable in Pioneer like that, but so you could imagine. Now we're in Magical Christmas Land, but why not? We're still in the brainstorming phase. No bad ideas. You could spend 5 mana, discard a powerful creature you want to get back. You're looking for Karmic Guide. If you had a bunch of replicative effects like that, where it would actually bring it back into play, maybe if you had 4 of a 4 mana version and 4 of a 5 mana version, now you have a ton of looks where you actually get to play that card plus the card that you discarded.
Hmm.
So in a lesser version of that, the first list when we get to mine that I want to talk about is Extraction Specialist. So that's a card that I'm very interested in playing in general. I've been really impressed with it the week we play with it. I thought it's actually kind of underplayed. And that's a card that gives you a lot of creatures in play. I want to play mana creatures anyway. They're encouraged to kill mana creatures on turn 2, so Extraction Specialist will often have a target to bring back. And then it's just a generically powerful card to hit. And then when you discard your 2 mana card, Extraction Specialist might bring it back. So that's not a full on like synergy like I'm describing with in Modern. Maybe if we could find enough pieces that did that, but that's at least like a micro synergy that I'm interested in exploring in Pioneer.
All right, well, let's take a look. No time like the present. So you've got a list sketched out for us here. It looks like you're in Bant colors. You're playing the Arkbow. You're playing the Extraction Specialist. But why blue?
Okay, specifically Renowned Weaponsmith. So Renowned Weaponsmith taps for 2 mana, but it must be used to cast an artifact or use an artifact's ability. So this is one of the few ways to actually cheat. We just said you can't cheat with Vivien's Arkbow. This is one of the few ways to actually cheat with Vivien's Arkbow. It lets you dump more mana than you normally would be able to on a given turn into the Arkbow, so it lets you kind of jump the curve, if you will. And I've been really impressed. I've been doing some various experimentation. The decks have been bad, so I haven't not brought them up on the podcast. But playing mana creatures on 2, including Renowned Weaponsmith, I've been experimenting with it, really incentivizes them to kill the creature. Then you Extraction Specialist it back on turn 3, and then your opponent's in the bind. Like, do they leave you with a 3/2 lifelink? Or do they try once again to kill your mana creature? And if they don't, you're threatening to, you've got 6 functional mana for an artifact on turn 4, which can be play the Arkbow and use it for 4. That's very powerful. So I've complemented that with a ton more ramp creatures. 4 Sylvan Carrier added. I think that's the best 2 mana ramp spell. That's also a creature in the entire format. And then Tangled Florahedron. So that increases our creature density. Is another 2 mana card that we can get back with Extraction Specialist. They're incentivized to kill. And if we miss, right, one of the things that's going to start happening in the late game is you're going to start discarding lands to dump like 4 mana into your Arkbow. This is a way to like get our mana up. So next turn we can dump in 5 or 6 while we keep pitching lands to our graveyard. This is just like sort of another way to naturally hit our quote unquote land for the turn.
Interesting. Yeah, it kind of stands out as like, why are we playing these extra 2 mana ramp cards on top of Sylvan Curated and Weaponsmith? But that makes total sense. But let's go back to the Weaponsmith for a second here. If you get to untap with a Weaponsmith, you now have on your next turn your lands plus 2 additional mana available for casting artifacts. But it can't just be the Arkbow, right? Like, there's got to be some other artifact payoff.
Yeah, exactly. So I like to have 8, right? We talk about, so we have 4 Arkbow. Verdurous Gearhulk is my card of choice. Again, I talk about this a lot. I apologize for being pedantic. This is a card that dodges Fatal Push that we can make 5 toughness. So now it's a card that, let's say they don't kill our Weaponsmith. We can end the next turn with a 5/5 trample Verdurous Gearhulk, and our Weaponsmith is now 4/6. That's just from 2 cards, right? So we've created like this huge board that's difficult to deal with just 1 removal spell. And the Weaponsmith can tap every turn, and we don't have to attack with it if we don't want. So Verdurous Gearhulk is also very good in a deck with Extraction Specialist because lifelink creatures are very powerful places to put a bunch of +1/+1 counters on. We also have a bunch of mana creatures, right? So Renowned Weaponsmith, Tangled Florahedron, Thalia has First Strike. We're talking about a bunch of crappy creatures that we're playing because we want the mana for Arkbow, but in the late game, all of a sudden Verdurous Gearhulk, is functionally a 5 mana 4/4 that lets other creatures attack into their board or is a pseudo extra 4/4 haste.
So I like that Gearhulk getting to be your powerful top end. I feel like that's not quite enough. Like, between Extraction Specialist and Verdurous Gearhulk, they basically have to carry you to victory because you've got a lot of mana creatures and Arkbows besides that. So do they have any help? I mean, is this going to be enough to actually deal 20 damage?
Yeah, so the card I really want to hit is Dream Trawler. This is a card I've been experimenting with a lot. It's really hard for fair decks to beat it, and it's resistant to removal, and it's a flying creature. So having a flying blocker is really important against spirits. You can put all the removal in your deck you want. You can play Fry, you can play Fatal Push. If you're just trading 1 for 1, eventually they're going to get in a place where they start beating down with their whatever, the 2/2 that lives or the 1/1 that lives. As soon as you resolve a flying creature and a flying creature with lifelink, it's really, really hard to lose. So yeah, I mean, the plan of the deck is very simple. We are trying to function as just a simple ramp deck to get to the Verdurous Gearhulk Dream Trawler, or we are trying to play Vivien's Arkbow and dump a bunch of mana into that to find Verdurous Gearhulk or Dream Trawler. Extraction Specialist is a very resilient threat that also is a de facto ramp spell because they're going to try to kill our mana creatures. We get to play 4 Thalia because our only non-creature spell is Arkbow. And then our 3-drops are just Extraction Specialist, and then removal, Skyclave Apparition, Reflector Mage, Glasspool Mimic. 1 of Rydane, which is another creature that we can spend mana on the backside, or Rydane itself is actually like a fine hate bear in certain matchups. And I couldn't resist 1 Fibblethip. If you hit Fibblethip with Vivien's Arkbow, you get to draw 2. I mean, it's kind of silly, but that's fine. You need to have a certain density of 2-drops because a lot of times you're going to just fire an Arkbow out for like 3 mana, and you want about 30 hits, I think, for your top 3 to be something that's useful.
So I think if I were going to test this deck, I would probably sacrifice something to just get more artifacts in there. Just because, like, on the occasions when I actually have the Weaponsmith on turn 2 and get to untap with it, I want to be sure that I'm getting paid. And I feel like I'd sacrifice Thalia to do that. I don't know if that's the right card, but something. Get, like, a few more artifact hits. But the thing is, they have to be artifact creatures because the Arkbow demands that, too. So it's actually not that many cards you can choose from. Cataclysmic Gearhulk, the white one, comes to mind. Or maybe just, like, Reality Chip. Do either of these sound good?
Reality Chip sounds good because Sylvan Caryatid exists, and Reality Chip lets you look at the top of your deck. So if you have to Arkbow for like 2 mana, and you know that at least you're, like, let's say you have 3 mana up. Do I want to cast, in a post-board game, do I want to cast Portable Hole and then do it for 2, or do I want to do it for 3? If I know that my top card's a 3-drop, I just get to spend my 3 mana that way. So I'd be interested in maybe playing one of, you don't have to play the Charming Prince. You could cut a Tangled Florahedron. I would not cut the Thalias myself. I think the Thalias give you a ton of game 1 against blue-red, blue-white, and the Lotus Field decks.
Okay, fair enough.
But, I'm not saying these cards are like, I'm playing a 1 of Scavenging Ooze for Graveyard Hate. You don't need that in there. You could cut that very easily. You don't need to play 4 Thalias. Maybe you could play 3. You don't need to play Charming Prince. You don't need to play Fibblethip. So if you really want to slip some artifacts in there, those are the slots that I would look to adjust.
Noted. All right, so that's a Pioneer build of Vivien's Arkbow using a sneaky synergy with the Renowned Weaponsmith. Let's look at a couple more concepts because I imagine we're only going to spend this one time in my life thinking about the.
I'm excited about playing this list. My list that I'm proposing. If I like it, I will play it. I'm actually kind of excited to try it out.
Oh, okay.
Just in general, I don't know if Arkbow's the right shell, but like Renowned Weaponsmith, Extraction Specialist, that's a thing. That's for sure a thing. I will be 5-0ing with a list like that at some point.
Okay, called shots. So other lists to consider. Briefly in Modern, Morde is excited about the idea of Arkbow. I don't know about Arkbow in practice, but I think he's already tried a league with green-white Devoted Druid with Vivien's Arkbow, harkening back to the glory days of green-white Druid before Modern Horizons. I think Laplacian had worked on like a build with 4 Arkbows for a while and got like a couple 5-0s, but I felt like Arkbow didn't actually add anything to the list, and we just never saw Arkbow again after that. So I see the list that Morde played. It's Vizier, Devoted Druid, Court of Calling, 3 Arkbows, some Mana Dorks.
He actually has a 4th Arkbow, which is not next to the other 3.
Oh, 4 Arkbows. Okay, well, yeah.
His 4th Court of Calling is also not near the other 3 chords in his freaking picture. What the hell's going on?
Maybe he built it as a 60-card deck and was like, screw it. Gotta go up to 80. Get the 4th Arkbow in. A variety of creatures, Endurance, Skyclave Apparition, Grist, etc., Restoration Angel, Solitude. I mean, this is fine. I just don't quite see...
Grist, super cool. Grist can be hit by Vivien's Arkbow. Let's just mention that. That's not obvious.
True. My issue here is I just don't see what Arkbow does for the deck. I think you really have to get a lot out of playing at instant speed here. Now, it is interesting that, like, that helps when you're playing a combo deck, creature-based combo deck. It digs for pieces. Devoted Druid adds a lot of mana. And especially if you like go infinite on mana with Vizier and Druid, then you just pour all your mana into the Arkbow to find something that wins the game from there. But not Walking Ballista, because that doesn't work. Duskwatch Recruiter, I think you find.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Yep.
So
the Duskwatch is a one of, right? So you assemble your combo, you make infinite mana, you either Chord for Duskwatch or you Vivien's Arkbow for Duskwatch.
Arkbow for 60. Get Duskwatch. Put everything back and Duskwatch a bunch of times.
How do you even win from there?
You just wait for them to give up, I think.
Yeah, you don't actually have a win, right? You can draw your creatures and play them all, but you don't win the game. Oh, you have a Shalai to go make all your normal creatures, and I mean, you'll just time out.
Just put one Ballista in here more. I don't know. He posted this a while ago. He didn't say how the league went, so I assume it was terrible. That's all I'll say about this deck for now.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the drawing board. So
yes,
dipping back to Pioneer, where I think we're going to spend the rest of our energy this episode. A couple of the Arkbow enthusiasts, the Arkbow partisans in the vote, went ahead and posted some of their ideas, and I noticed that several people were interested in werewolves. Flash, werewolves, and the idea here is that once you have Arkbow in play, you are not actually casting spells, right? You're just activating the Arkbow.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the card came out, people thought it would be really good with Flash creatures. I am not of that opinion. I see you've got a Star City Games link. I don't know who it is writing about this card, but they have the same thought is, yes, Arkbow functions at instant speed, but I don't think you want the rest of your deck to do so because Flash creatures typically give you a little bit less bang for your buck. So I like that with Werewolves, most of those cards are not Flash, right? Werewolf Pack Leader, Kessig Naturalist. They benefit if you pass with all your mana up, but they give you enough for the mana cost. And Kessig Naturalist giving you mana that enters your mana pool, and you don't lose it, so you can put that into the Arkbow after the attack, let's say. I like that as well. So I think that's super cool. I like Kessig Naturalist as maybe a natural way to just kind of... Like, Arkbow is a cool place to just dump all the extra mana that you might generate from that.
Yeah, I'm looking at a few different builds from Judge Rob. A basic red-green werewolves, and then a version splashing black for Graveyard Trespasser, and I think he also had a version splashing white. I can't recall what the white was for. Kessig Naturalist, you don't see it that often, but it is powerful. What's the payoff? Well, flipping your werewolves is good, right? You've got Tovolar, Dire Overlord, the Reckless Stormseeker. If you're in the black version, you got the Graveyard Trespasser. Night Pack Ambusher, probably the best payoff, right? Like there, if you don't cast anything on your turn, you're getting free value every turn. Buffs your wolves. The card quality seems strong here.
Yeah, I mean, my concern with the Ambusher, though, is if you don't have Vivien's Arkbow in play, you don't really get to cast any other spells if you want to get your free wolf. Because there's so few instants. So, like, I play my Elf, I play my Tovolar, and then on turn 4, I play Night Pack Ambusher as a instant speed or whatever on their end of turn. Now on my next turn, almost every other card in my deck is sorcery speed. So if I want to add to the board and play a Reckless Stormseeker, I cannot do that if I want my free wolf. So there's a lot of tensions here, I think it'll just take some play testing to figure out exactly what the payoffs are. I see in the Black Splash list, I like the Bone Crusher as a removal spell that still can be a hit for Arkbow. I think that's really clever. But I get nervous about like multiple Culligan's Commands, multiple Riveteer's Charms that aren't hits for Vivien's Arkbow, and I don't know that they're powerful enough to justify their inclusion when your deck is mostly creature focused.
Right. I think the clean red-green version does play Collected Company as well, and I think you should just think about your Arkbow decks as company decks.
Yes.
We know that you need 26 creatures, bare minimum, and if some of those are mana dorks, you should probably go up to 28 or maybe even 30, just because you want to get something good off your company. And I think it's the same with Arkbow, right? You want density of creatures. You don't want to whiff. You don't want your stuff to be all over the mana curve. You want to keep it pretty concentrated so that it's all going to fall within the range of like 3, maybe 4 mana.
Yeah, and maybe, just as an exercise, now, of course, I want to go all in. That's my brew style when exploring a card, but you might start with like a 4 collected company, 2 Arkbow, right? They're almost like company 5 and 6 in terms of their value. And then you don't play any 4 drops, or maybe you play like 1 5 or 6 drop, right? When you get into the late game, if that you're really searching for like some big hammer.
Yeah, that's a good approach. I'm looking at another list here from our Discord from pugsonchairs. It's again trying to exploit werewolves. It's just black-green. And they've actually settled on Howlpack Piper, 4 copies of that. And that's actually pretty cute. Haven't seen that since draft. Do you know this card?
I do not know this card. Is this the one that it cheats cards into play?
It is, yeah. So werewolf.
Because of course the original Elvish Piper is how I'm guessing. That's the throwback, which also costs 4 mana.
4 mana, 2/2, and the Howlpack Piper actually can't be countered. Activated ability, 2 mana, tap it, put a creature card from your hand into play, and then you also get to untap the Piper if you put a wolf or werewolf in. But what's powerful about this card is that whenever it transforms from day into night, or if it enters on the night side, you get to look at your top 6 cards, take a creature, put it into your hand. So just having a Howlpack Piper, passing the turn with it, not only do you flip to the more powerful 4/4 Wild Song Howler, but you go up a creature, right? You look at your top 6 and get something else good. It's interesting. I mean, obviously 4 mana for a 2/2 is, you're setting yourself up for some some Stomp Town, but
whenever Stomp resolves, yeah.
Population U.
I like this idea though. So you play Arkbow, you're trying to Arkbow for 4 to EOT Howlpack Piper, and then in theory that lets you cheat something into play. I'm wondering if there's like super sweet cards we could get paid off for, like that, where the 2 mana is almost cheating on the cost. So what's the most expensive wolf or werewolf we could play? That's kind of interesting to me. I know there was a 5 mana werewolf.
Tovalar's Huntmaster, Avabruck Caretaker.
Yeah, okay. Like I'm interested in, like, you know, of course, I want to push it all the way. So I think this is a super interesting concept, and I would certainly keep like the Graveyard Trespasser and maybe the Werewolf Pack Leader, but I'd want to have like a top end that maybe isn't Night Pack Ambusher. That's instead maybe like, you know, some of the 6 mana werewolf, the one that makes humans and stuff when it comes into play, or wolves when it comes into play, that Winota used to play.
Yeah, the Huntmaster.
Yeah. So that, I think that's cool. And then in the late game, when you've got mana, Huntmaster is what you're looking for with your bow.
Okay, yeah.
Just something to think about. I'm not saying, I have not played this list. Maybe pugsonchairs, awesome name by the way, has had a ton of success with this already. But my instinct when I see a card like Howlpack Piper, which you describe maybe the worst case scenario, we play it for 4, our opponent stomps it on end of turn, right? And we're never winning that game. So when I do untap with it, I want that to be like a really devastating turn. And if it can put in, you know, a 6/6 wolf plus 2 wolves, and I don't have to play a spell that turn, so I can go to dark or go to night as we pass to our opponent. That's the kind of thing I'm looking to do.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that's a brief exploration of Vivien's Arkbow. Maybe when Morde comes back next week, he can set the record straight and show us the path, but
probably not.
So let's shift gears again, talk about the getaway car. Little VW buggy or PT Cruiser or something. It's a weird looking car, I gotta say. 3 mana vehicle from New Capenna, 4/3 haste, crew 1. 4/3 haste, crew 1. Whenever a getaway car attacks or blocks, return up to 1 target creature that crewed it this turn to its owner's hand. So you don't have to do this, right? But if you did crew with a 1-power creature that you want to bounce, you get to do so when you successfully attack or block with a getaway car.
Yeah, randomly putting this on block, of course, evokes memories of Smuggler's Copter. I don't know how often you're blocking with your 4/3 haste vehicle, but it's worth knowing that you can do so. You don't have to attack. But yeah, I think the thing that strikes you is 3 mana for a 4/3 haste is very aggressively costed. There aren't any 3 mana 4/3 haste we get to just naturally play.
Okay, so that's telling us that, yeah, we're playing a slightly above rate creature as long as we're investing in crew. But then you have this bounce ability, which seems like at odds with the 4/3 haste angle, right? Like, I'm trying to get in there with little questing beast cars, am I really trying to bounce my creatures? So like where do these things meet? How do we put this together?
Yeah, and I can't say that I've solved the riddle myself. I mean, I have not played any games with this card yet, but of course your instinct is to play cards that are relatively cheap to bounce, that give you something, right? So maybe in the early game you don't bounce a creature, you'd rather have the body in play and mana is tight. But in the late game, you're bouncing your, card that cycles or card that destroys a permanent or something, and it's functionally drawing you a card, right? Is the thought process.
Oh, that's true. So you do not have to bounce a 1-power creature. It's crew 1, but you can crew with anything. If you want to replay your Bonecrusher Giant, you can.
If you have 7 mana in play and you've got Agent of Treachery, right? You crew up your Getaway Car, attack them, bounce your Agent, and you can replay it. But I think the default mode you should think about is what deck wants to play this on 3 and attack. Right, so that means we want to have a creature in play, so we should be playing a creature on 1 and 2, so we're resistant to removal spells, and then we're going to play this and attack with it. That should be the goal of your deck. The bouncing thing is a possible benefit in the late game, but I don't think that's why you want to be playing this. There's lots of bounce effects, especially in Modern, that are much more powerful than this, because they blink, they don't bounce. You don't want to fall in love, as we'll talk about when we talk about the Mardu Defector list, with generating value in this way. It's
All right, so my 1-drops, I assume Thraben Inspector or Voldaren Epicure are my best options. I see you got both in the first list here.
Yeah, so the first place I started was red-white list. So we're playing Thraben Inspector and Voldaren Epicure. Obviously, again, we don't have to blink them every time, but Voldaren Epicure especially is good in our aggro deck. Doing a damage each time. The blood is useful. Because we have so many artifacts, Toolcraft Exemplar becomes interesting. So you could turn 1 Toolcraft Exemplar, turn 2 Portable Hole, Voldaren Epicure, turn 3 Getaway Car, crew it up, bounce your Voldaren Epicure. You've done 13 damage with Voldaren Epicure coming on your next turn. That's quite good. The other card that I'm really interested in is Luminarch Aspirant. Luminarch Aspirant can stay at 1 power, still crew Getaway Car, but then it gets to pump it. And pumping Getaway Car is awesome. It's resistant to lots of the red removal as soon as it gets to 4 toughness. Lots of removal that kills 4 toughness creatures is sorcery speed. You don't have to crew it in the face of a fatal push or something. You can sort of force them to spend their removal spells on your Toolcraft Exemplar or Luminarch Aspirants. And then another card I'm somewhat interested in, at least thinking about, is Magda Brazen Outlaw. It pumps our Toolcraft Exemplar. It can tap to crew Getaway Car. You can even, let's say it's late game, you can tap Magda, crew Getaway Car, bounce Magda, play it again, and then crew Getaway Car at end of turn. You can get 2 treasures in a turn that way from 1 Magda, if you wanted. If the 5th treasure was because you can overcrew it any time. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe this list only has 2 Magda. Maybe it's actually worth it to go way more in on that aspect of it. If you're playing a bunch of Voldaren Epicure, I like the idea of not having to cast a lot of spells and win. Let's say Getaway Car hits them a couple times, Toolcraft Exemplar hits them once. I like playing Fiery Temper, Shrapnel Blast. I'm not exactly sure what the numbers need to be there, where you don't have to resolve that many more spells through the last points of damage. There's a lot of artifacts hanging around if we've got Thraben Inspectors and Voldaren Epicure, so Shrapnel Blast seems very interesting to me. Again, you mentioned Bonecrusher Giant. We can shock, play Bonecrusher Giant, crew Getaway Car. We can always blink it if we need to shock again. That's super mana intensive, right? That's not something we really want to do. But yeah, you can tell I there's lots of ideas here. I haven't really parsed it out into the exact list that I want, but those cards are what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about Getaway Car.
Yeah, I think Bonecrusher and Extraction Specialist makes sense as powerful 3-drops that benefit from getting bounced, and you have room for some in this list. Maybe there needs to be more. I'm not sure. I guess it depends on how successful this deck is at actually getting the jump on people. Your 2 slot is where you have to choose between reliable creatures like Rafine's Informant, right? You have 4 of that here. That does a little bit every time. It doesn't do enough, right? Do you want to maybe swing for something higher, Ingenious Smith would be another example. I don't know if we've met the threshold of artifacts, but that would be a powerful card. Maybe instead of Magda, we want, what is the other dwarf? The pilot, the 3/1 pilot that scries too. Bouncing that lets you find more gas. these are the slots you have to play with. I think the one slot feels locked to me based on how you've described the play pattern.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And then, if you're not playing Raffine's Informant, you don't have enough discards, so then you don't want to play Fiery Temper. Then maybe you want to go all in, like 4 Shrapnel Blast, 3 Magda, cut the Raffine's Informants, play some more of those dwarves like you're talking about, and then maybe like 1 top end Embercleave to be able to tutor. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of ways to build it. I think there's something there. Like you said, I like the 16 1-drops. I like some number of Magda, and I like 4 Luminarch Aspirant, and then 4 Getaway Car, and then how many Bone Crusher Giants, how many Extraction Specialists, how many Shrapnel Blasts. Do you want to play the Informant Fiery Temper package or not? I don't think this is a deck that wants Fable, even though I think it is one of the better red cards in the format. Fable is a very mid-rangey card, and I think we want our opponent to be on the back foot for most of the game. I don't think we can afford to play a longer game.
So I mentioned Ingenious Smith, and there you do need to have a critical mass of artifacts. That's a problem that you've tried to solve in your next Getaway Car build, where you do have 4 Smiths.
Yeah, so when some of our artifact sources are no longer Voldaren Epicure and we're actually playing artifacts, then our number for Getaway Smith or Ingenious Smith goes up. So 4 Portable Hole, 4 Thraben Inspector, 4 Toolcraft Exemplar, 4 Moonsnare Prototype, a 1 of Shadow Spear, and then Lion Sash as again an artifact for Smith or Toolcraft Exemplar. That also is a graveyard hate piece that Extraction Specialists can get back if they kill it. Again, I think 4 Luminarch Aspirant is awesome. 4 Smith is cool because Smith, kind of plays the two-way game. It can be a value card that's drawing cards every turn if you want, or it can be a card that grows. Every turn you're playing a Thraben Inspector, you're making your Ingenious Smith better. You're not just getting an extra clue. So Ingenious Smith can be a card that Getaway Car blinks. If it's only 1/1 already, why not just play it, blink it, play it again? Now it's a value engine. Or is it a card that Getaway Car is turning on by blinking a Thraben Inspector every turn? It's actually making sure we always have a new artifact to hit with it.
So that part makes sense. The card that I don't quite understand is the Moonsnare Prototype, because I think of that as a ramp card, and I'm not sure that this is a ramp deck, right? Like, shouldn't we be playing more creatures instead?
Yeah, my thought process there is we're going to have all these, clues lying around, and I want to be able to use the mana. The clue is what we're going to tap with the Moonsnare Prototype is the thought process, or the Portable Hole. So it's basically like almost replacing lands. We could even cut lands, like we could go down to 21 or 20 lands. And then Moonsnare Prototype lets us hit our land drop while adding artifacts to the board. And then in the late game, it's like a de facto removal spell that can get rid of almost anything. But yeah, you might be right that it's just not the right card, and maybe we need to just find a creature there. The problem is the artifact count gets a little low for Ingenious Smith if we're not playing an artifact in that slot, and there isn't a great artifact creature at that cost.
Well, I'm going to suggest a 1-mana artifact creature, Network Disruptor. 1/1 flying, ETB taps a creature. I mean, do you think that could be the card that would fulfill the roles? It crews the Getaway Car, punches through for damage. Rebuying it later in the game is actually not that bad.
Yeah, I don't hate it. That's not terrible. You say it flies?
1/1 flying, when Network Disruptor enters the battlefield, tap target permanent. So it actually taps lands too if you need that. It's mainly there to enable ninjas, but I mean, yeah, it crews the Getaway Car.
Yeah, it's not crazy. I'll say that. I'm interested. If you're selling some stock, I'm interested in purchasing some of it.
Yeah, buy low and then forget about it. Forget we had this conversation.
Other cards I'm somewhat interested in. I actually think Fleetwheel Cruiser is a little underplayed. The turn it comes into play, it's just a 5/3 haste for 4 mana. We have a bunch of 2 power creatures that can easily crew it. And Baron Tolarian Archmage isn't great. It's much worse than Extractor Mage, but it is cool that it actually draws a card every time Getaway Car puts a card back in your hand. So it's like a crazy value engine. So if you play Baron Tolarian Archmage, you bounce your opponent's, whatever, Kalitas. You crew up Getaway Car with Thraben Inspector, return it to your hand. Not only do you get to replay Thraben Inspector, you also draw a card at end of turn from Baron.
That's really good, right? That's like a super powerful mana war.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you don't want to fall too much in love with like getting this value from your getaway car, because the whole point is you're attacking with this 4/3 haste. And so I think if you get too far away from that, like you play a bunch of barons and you play a bunch of 1 mana cards that blink, like you're having to expend a lot of mana to get your value out of it. Like Thraben Inspector is not actually drawing you a card unless you're tapping 2 mana to sack the clue. That's what attracted me to the Moonsnare prototype. So we can actually like turn those cards into something where Moonsnare prototype is tapping the clue itself is worth a mana almost with a Moonsnare prototype in play. But again, maybe I just have like the math wrong, or it's not going to play out that well in my head. But you can tell this blue-white list does not have direct damage. So it's much more value-oriented, and it's trying to kind of, go over the top with Ingenious Smith as another 2-mana card that draws a card and is a threat. So I'm not exactly sure which build I think is better or more exciting, but you can tell like there's something there. And I think the cards, Portable Hole Thraben Inspector, Toolcraft Exemplar, Luminarch Aspirant Getaway Car, that's a shell that we can put stuff around, and what those specific cards are not known right now. Not known by me.
Yeah, 2 lists with Getaway Car is pretty good, I think. Certainly more words spent analyzing it than any other podcast is doing.
Maybe for good reason.
Yeah. But all right, so we promised the Getaway Car lists last month, and we finally delivered on that. Will we play them? I'm not sure, but I'm intrigued. What we have been playing over the last few weeks is some other weird miscellaneous decks. These are all in Pioneer. David, you've been working overtime, right? Trying out this and that card. Some we talked about, some we haven't. And I think to close out today, we want to just review some of those results, because you've had some pretty promising leagues.
Yeah, so the first list I want to talk about is a Grixis list. The key card I wanted to try out was Heart of Kiran. So my thought process when I was messaging Dan about it on a lunch hour was the following. Heart of Kiran is really good against sorcery speed removal, because at the time, lots of Strangles were being played. So it's great against Strangle. I talked earlier about how important it is to have flying blockers, so it's really, really good against Spirits. And then it's good against Sweepers. I was losing to, the eventual, even with Thalia or whatever, they draw their Sweeper and they sweep the board. If you can just play a card and just attack with a hasted Heart, that's quite good. So I was like, it seems good against Blue-Red because it blocks Phoenix, and it actually takes a lot of Connive triggers until your Shredder is big enough to attack through my Heart. So with that as a starting point, I said, all right, what is the easiest way to sort of crew this up? And I was like, we actually have a new 3-mana Planeswalker, Kaido Shizuki. I was very excited about that when it was spoiled. Kaido actually works very well with it. Turn 2 Heart, turn 3 Kaido minus it. Crew up the Heart. Heart is very likely to be able to attack freely, right? We did expect on turn 3, there's not a bigger flying creature in play than Heart. And then we get to plus Kaito to draw a card. It's just so then it literally is a 3-mana Planeswalker plus 1 draw card. That card does not exist in any format. And then for the rest of the game, it basically gets to do that. It never goes up in loyalty, so it's basically a 0-mana draw card on a 3-mana Planeswalker, and it is crewing the Heart for free the whole time, and can crew the Heart again without having to tap a creature to block. Once I got to that point, and I was like, all right, I want to play Grixis, then I just filled in with what I thought the best 2-mana, 3-power creatures were, which are Bloodtithe Harvester and Tenacious Underdog. At 3-mana, Graveyard Trespasser is a 3-mana 3/3. 3 Bone Crusher Giants. I've not been liking that card very much, so I only played 3. 2 Royal Scions, just to have kind of, we know that Royal Scions, it's really only good in this list specifically with Heart, but it's actually interesting with Graveyard Trespasser. It lets it get in attacks sometimes where it wouldn't, especially against mono green. And then because we have all this looting with Kaito, Bloodtithe Harvester, and Royal Scions, I put a 1 of Rielle in. And then instead of the 4th Bone Crusher, I put a 1 of Chandra. Again, it is another Planeswalker that can crew up Heart for no mana. And then your normal removable package. 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Strangle, 2 Dreadbore, 1 Strangle, 23 lands.
Yeah, I was excited for this list. The return to glory of Heart of Kiran. A terror in Standard back in the Gideon days, but you just haven't seen it in forever. It was usually paired with white creatures. We were just talking about Toolcraft Exemplar, and I was like, oh, Heart of Kiran, maybe that's the missing piece for that Ingenious Smith build. Get some hotshot mechanics in there to get the artifact density up. here you're taking it a totally different direction, right? Grixis with some planeswalkers. So when you play this in a league, what happened?
It felt really good. The deck did exactly what I thought. I beat Lotus Field very easily. I beat mono white humans. I just drew a zillion cards with Rielle against them, which was crazy. When you plus Kaito with Rielle in play, it's just better than a draw card. You get to loot and then draw again. Like, you just tear through your deck. I found all 4 of my Fatal Pushes because I was seeing like 3 cards a turn. I beat Blue-Red Drakes very comfortably. I have an awesome picture of me Notion Thiefing. Where they have 2 Ledger Shredders in play and they're casting a Crackling Drake to trigger them. I have 4 mana open with a Notion Thief.
Oh, no.
And the best part is on my turn, because Connive is a May, I intentionally just cast 2 spells. So they just discard their hand and I draw 2. Notion Thief is just a crazy card against Shredder. Lost to mono red. I actually forgot to add Cletus to my mana traders. I think I just added like a random duress to the sideboard. It kind of caught up to me there. And then I beat red black, so which is kind of like the mirror if you think of it that way. You know, a lot of the lists I've been proposing of late have some of the similar shell of red black, and then I just, you know, as a mid-range, one of the master mid-range brewers of the format, I just tech out my deck, so I'm always better than Jund. It's sort of like when the podcast started, right? We just brewed up Niv, we just build like a better Jund, and then sideboarded to like beat the polar ends of Modern. Sort of what I've been, you know, that's sort of the project I've really been working on in Pioneer. So other than losing pretty convincingly to mono red, and I don't think we can be that bad with like 4 main deck Trespasser, 4 main deck Push. You know, I think there's just a few tweaked sideboard cards. We should be okay there. The list actually felt really good. It just beating red black just comfortably in the game. I did not mull twice, just won easily. Just resolve a 3-mana planeswalker. And again, my rule of thumb is if you complete your second 2-for-1, your third 2-for-1 against red black, you've just won the game. You can cast more spells if you want. Just offer the right hand, like it's been good. They take so long to kill you. They really struggle to kill heart. You don't have to crew it up into a fatal push if you don't want. And 3-mana planeswalkers are just a nightmare for them. They don't put pressure on them very easily, and you just set up these scenarios where you run away with the game. So, yeah, the list felt awesome. I'm actually excited to try it again. The one thing that's interesting to me is we're not playing a lot of blue cards, and the planeswalkers only felt good with Heart of Kiran. So could we build a red-black list, and then we'd be looking at like the mono-red 3-mana Chandra and the black Liliana, or we could main deck Obnixilis, although we don't have great targets to sacrifice. It's not clear to me you need the blue, although there obviously were scenarios throughout the league where the blue just generated a ton of card advantage for me. Maybe the deck wants to be more aggro and just be like all in, like multiple Obnixilis, like plus Obnixilis, minus it with hard attack it in. So that's something to maybe explore.
Yeah, only 6 blue cards in the main. That could easily become something else. The ratio of creatures to disruption, right? So you are playing 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Push, 1 Strangle, 2 Dreadbore. That's a ton of spells, right? And then you're also playing pretty aggressively slanted creatures, the Heart of Kirans and a bunch of creatures that can crew it. 3 or 4 power each. It's almost like a tension there, right? But did you feel like when you were playing this that it made sense, right? Like you weren't just like, oh, I have 2 creatures and I really wish I drew another one, but I drew this Push and Thoughtseize instead.
No, I mean, luckily your planeswalkers just have the ability to kind of find the right stuff, right? They, if you want to think of them as like fables, right? They're just filtering through your deck all the time. Like Kaito is looting or making 1/1 and then drawing. The Royal Scions, if you have a creature, is pumping it. If not, it's just looting, right? And it's just a different kind of threat. I mean, I ultimated my Royal Scions against red black because I just kept finding the right card every turn, and there's nothing they could do about it. I did end up drawing a ton of cards with Rielle throughout the league. So either that means like, I think Rielle is really good, but maybe everything just lined up well for Rielle to be an insane value card. That probably isn't typical, but it felt like maybe just through sheer luck, the ratio ended up very perfect. And the looting is even great because Heart of Kiran is a legend, right? If it feels like they're not going to kill it, it's just very easy card to loot away and turn into anything else.
Yeah.
And Tenacious Underdog can always come back from your graveyard. I brought it back one time just to crew a heart to do lethal damage.
Oh, nice.
And you have 3 lands, and they all have enough power to crew heart if that's what you need. Both Hives and the Den.
So you only played 1 Rielle in this build. Maybe the secret is to play more copies of Rielle. So the next build that you talked about, kind of a dedicated Rielle brew around deck. Although here, I think you'd initially propose 3, maybe 4 copies of Rielle, and you landed on 2 in the final version.
Yeah, so I wanted to build a deck that was resuscitating Damon's favorite archetype. He was really excited to play all these 1Ks with the blue-red control shell. And that shell was playing 4 Narset and then 3 Collective Defiance, maybe 1 Days Undoing. I can't remember the exact ratio. But of course it played 4 Expressive Iteration. And he felt like losing Expressive Iteration there was actually a huge loss. The blue-red Phoenix list can play, various other looting effects, Izzet Charm, etc. But, without that way to find the pieces, he didn't feel like the deck was good enough. So, I wanted Damon to be happy. We all want Damon to be satisfied in this world. So I was thinking to myself, man, Collective Defiance is, of course, great with Narset. You target your opponent with the draw. Maybe you kill a creature at the same time. But it's actually really good with Rielle. You can target yourself with the loot, you double your hand size, and at the same time it's a removal spell, and 4 damage is, kind of irrelevant size. It kills Cletus, it kills Thing in the Ice, etc., a Ledger Shredder that's connived. So I was playing 3 Narset, 2 Rielle, 3 Collective Defiance. And at the top end, I talked about the first build of this. I wanted something that allowed me to win the game, and I was playing 4 Bone Crusher. I said, this felt wrong, I don't like Bone Crusher. You had proposed a few ideas, so I said, all right, let's go 4 Crackling Drake and then 2 Fable of the Mirror Breaker. And that's all I'm going to need to win the game. If I can just delay them with this sort of Narset Rielle thing, Crackling Drake is just going to end the game quite quickly.
I remember suggesting the Fable because that felt on theme with the Rielle looting. I don't remember suggesting Crackling Drake, and actually I don't quite see how it fits. Is it just that you feel like you have enough instants and sorceries to make it powerful, so why not?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the Crackling Drake is just a value card. So you're playing all these cards that almost require multiple answers from your opponent, and then it's attacking from all these different angles. When they see blue-red lists, they try to attack your graveyard. Well, no card in my list cares about the graveyard except for Rielle, kind of. But they still need to kill it. It's not like killing the graveyard means they can just leave Rielle around. And then Crackling Drake just draws a card and then wins on the following turn. So once you do the Narset thing, you need a way to end the game. And the thought process in my mind was once we start doing that, we just resolve Drake, try to kill him that turn. If it doesn't work, resolve Drake next turn. And we just start ripping through our deck. So yeah, you did not recommend Drake, but you said Bone Crusher Giant probably just isn't the right card, and that is correct. As soon as I cut Bone Crusher Giant, this deck really felt good.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like you had a 4-1 with the initial build, but you took this updated build. How did that do?
I 4-1'd again, but it felt awesome. I only lost red-black mid-range top-decked Invoke Despair on the last turn they had in the game to kill me. Other than that, I would have 5-0'd. Yeah, just a reminder. So this deck is playing the whole blue-red package with Ledger Shredder, but instead of playing any of the Delve cards, we're playing 4 Censor and Rielle and Fable as sort of these smoothing cards, with Crackling Drake being the best card in the entire format probably to copy with Fable other than Transmogrify targets. And then Censor being a card that lets you transition to that turn 3 where you Shredder plus trigger Connive. So your ideal curve is Censor on 2, whatever they're doing, Ledger Shredder plus a spell to Connive, then Rielle, trigger it again, but then you're going up cards with your Shredder Rielle. And then after that, you're in the place where Collective Defiance Narset can happen or Crackling Drake. So it's just a way to transition where we're not as proactive as the blue-red decks, but we actually have the ability to handle some of the bigger threats. I was able to Censor, because Mono Green plays everything right on curve. You could handle cards that Mono Red normally can't handle because you can Censor Kiora, whereas the blue-red shell that exists right now just has to let Kiora resolve and then hope to either kill it or kill them. It does the main thing that I want is we're not just playing this because it's cute and Rielle's kind of whatever. We're actually changing the matchup. Mono Black is really bad against us, even though of course it's the one deck that won, but they exile my graveyard multiple times, and this deck does not care about that, whereas against blue-red it would have been devastating. That we had no graveyard. Any, dig through time or delve effects would have been stuck in my hand. So I like that we've changed the build and it changes our matchup spread to actually fight against the normal sideboard plans for decks like this.
Still feels weird to me to not play at least some delve spell. Not even 4 copies, just some.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is. I'm not sure this is right. You can see my notes here. Are we just doing this on hard mode, like just obstinately not playing delve spells so Rielle can be a little better? I don't know. But like, yeah, Rielle with Shredder is absolutely insane. Like, you just draw so many cards. I mean, you can see all these screenshots. I've seen 15 to 16 more cards than my opponent. You just start tearing through your deck. Fable was actually insane. So I think the proposed version I would have going forward is to cut some of the Narset Collective Defiance, like maybe one of each, and just play the full 4 Fable. Fable's awesome if you have Rielle in play. They actually have to kill Rielle first. Otherwise, you get to draw 5 cards on that next turn. If they're spending a removal spell on Rielle, they're often having to spend a removal spell on the 2/2 that it makes. Now they have to spend a removal spell for the flipped Fable because it might target Crackling Drake when it comes into play. You just put a ton of pressure on their removal. They can't let anything stick around for a turn or you get a ton of value out of it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so we're thinking Narset is not actually crucial for this, right? So cut the Narsets.
Cut a Narset or 2. I'd still maybe like leave 1 or 2 around, but I just don't be all in on it. Like, I have 3 Narset, 3 Collective Defiance here. I'd maybe go down to like 2 Narset, 2 Collective Defiance, 4 Fable.
And we'll sneak in a couple, let's say, dig through times. You know, delve in the graveyard is fine. If Rielle has 0 power, that's fine.
Yeah, so you could maybe like cut a Collective Defiance and put a dig through time. You could cut a Narset, play another dig through time. And then, yeah, maybe now we're cooking with gas.
Okay. So another successful outing for Izzet Rielle on its 2nd or 3rd version.
Yeah.
Shifting gears, we talked about the card Humble Defector 3 weeks back, I want to say. We were interested in Extraction Specialist, a card that has really started to impress on a lot of different decks. Pairs beautifully with Charming Prince, and completing that little triangle, you have Humble Defector, which also pairs nicely with Charming Prince, and Extraction Specialist can get back the Defector when it inevitably bites the dust. So I decided to test out one of your builds, the Mardu one, where you're taking that core of Charming Prince, Extraction Specialist, Humble Defector, and saying, okay, what else plays nicely with the Humble Defector effect, right? Here you're looking for ways to maybe sacrifice the Defector before it switches sides, right? You just hold priority, activate it, draw 2. You still have time to eat it with Village Rites, for example. Draw a bunch of cards. You're drawing 4 cards there. You can get back the Defector later with Extraction Specialist. It seemed to make sense. Claim the Firstborn is another card that we've seen paired successfully with Village Rites in like the Ob Nixilis decks and Pioneer. Claim the Firstborn, Village Rites, that also seems to work with the Defector, right? Activate Defector, give it to them, immediately claim it back, tap it again, draw more cards. They get the Defector, yes, but you just drew 1,000,000 cards. And the final cute piece of tech in this deck was 3 copies of Butcher of the Horde, the Mardu Siege Rhino. Another sacrifice outlet to do tricky stuff with your Defector, and we also have young Pyromancers here just to get more board presence, get more fodder, and amass, the critical resources to actually win the game.
Yeah, so you took this one out into the league, Dan, and how did it treat you?
Well, it's been a while. I'm just looking at my notes here. It looks like 0-2, 0-2, 0-2, 1-2, and then 2-1. So yeah, not great. Not great for this particular version. I think I went 1-4. Spitefully played it out in the 0-4 bracket to get that win on the board against a Goblin deck. But it just wasn't quite powerful enough. It wasn't that I wasn't able to do the thing. I did the thing. I did all the things that we just talked about, but they just weren't powerful enough. What it came down to was that anytime you're casting Charming Prince, anytime you're casting Humble Defector, the mana you spend is just not enough for the return. So you're already just putting yourself behind. I'm falling behind for a couple turns to do this stuff, and then what's my payoff? My payoff is drawing extra cards, but often at the cost of then like putting myself even further behind. If I have to sacrifice a Defector or give it away, I'm just like taking on this huge deficit, and the overall card quality that I'm drawing with all these cards is like not enough to make up for that. I had games where I did all that, drew a bunch of cards, discard to hand size even, and just like, didn't have enough firepower left to actually take control of the board and win the game. I think for similar reasons, right? Like Butcher of the Horde just never delivered. I almost never had multiple things in play that I was happy to sacrifice. I would usually play it, look at my one creature, and be like, I really don't want to sacrifice this. Like, I really would love to have haste, but I just don't have enough leftover material. Like the build is like barely hanging together. There's not an excess. There's not an abundance, and I think Butcher of the Horde requires an abundance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we understand all the. Well, I made these decisions. I will, own them. You start with Humble Defector, Charming Prince, and then, like exactly like you said, Extraction Specialist is good with both, and then we want other cards that are good with Humble Defector. So then I went down to Claim the Firstborn, and then I was like, if I'm going to claim the Firstborn, I should probably have Village Rights. If I have Village Rights, I want more creatures, so I should probably play Young Pyromancer, which also works with Extraction Specialist. And it seems like we made a bunch of like gated decisions that ended up in a place where the deck is very poor.
Yeah, so it's partly that. I mean, the way that it is constructed, it successfully does what it tries to do. Then you actually get into the queues and you realize that in Pioneer, other players don't care about this queue plan. Like, they're just going to kill you. Mono Blue Spirits, Boros Heroic twice in a row. They're just going to run you over. And if I want to draw cards while they're doing so, like, they don't really care. Blue-White Control on the other end of the spectrum, also I lost that 0-2. Like, they let me draw cards, and they just drew more cards than me. Like, they stuck a Planeswalker, and that was worth more than everything I had done up to that point in the game. So I found myself like a little bit caught in the middle and working hard to do a cool thing that just, in the end, wasn't quite powerful enough.
Yeah, I mean, it might just be that it's not there, or it's like missing one other card. But, I do have a strange love for Humble Defector, so I will continue my journey to the center of the earth with this guy.
Oh, Extraction Specialist was a huge all-star. I should mention that. Like, the games that I won were the games where I drew like multiple specialists, and there you feel like you're actually pulling way ahead. So that was impressive.
Yeah, Extraction Specialist is a super underrated card. Like, it is maybe the best white 3-drop in the entire format, I believe.
All right, so let's end on a higher note. Last deck here.
All right, let me pull it up. At the very beginning of Pioneer, Aspiring Spike, who now mostly brews in Modern, had outlined a shell which had Karn's Great Creator, Fires of Invention, Ugin's Nexus, ways to sacrifice it, but when Ugin's Nexus is sacrificed, it exiles itself from your graveyard. So you could like Karn, -2, find the one Ugin's Nexus from your sideboard with Fires in play it. Next turn, find a way to sacrifice it, -2 Karn, get that same Ugin's Nexus because it went into exile, and then sacrifice it again. Because you were playing Fires of Invention, you had to play tons of land sources, you had to play ways to accelerate lands into play to kind of get this to happen. I had picked up I had modified that version, I don't know what it was, 3 or 4 months ago now, I kind of lose track, maybe longer. And had played to a 4-1 and then picked it up like a couple months after that and like 1-4 drop, 0-3 drop. Like, I'd had no luck with it. And what I've really found lately is these Fires lists really flood. It's just so frustrating to flood with these Fire lists. So I was thinking to myself, why not just play a bunch of sacrifice effects for the artifact and just let's play 4 Ugin's Nexus? Because you don't need to take all the turns. Like, what would happen with the Karn thing is I'd have all these turns and my opponent would just give up. I mean, the game's over. So why not just play all these sacrifice effects with Ugin's Nexus, but get to play real interaction now, the full boat of Thoughtseize and Push. And Ugin's Nexus, if you have enough sac effects, is literally a 5-mana Time Warp in this format, if we can squint a little bit. And it gives you fodder for your sacrifice effects if you have them in your deck. So my list is 4 Fatal Push, 4 Thoughtseize, 2 Voltage Surge, that's an artifact sac effect, 2 Prosperous Innkeeper, 2 Sylvan Caryatid, 4 Bloodtithe Harvester, 2 Deadly Dispute, that's a sacrifice effect. Saheeli Sublime Artificer, that works with Ugin's Nexus in a complicated way. 4 Vraska, Queen, Golgari Queen, she is a sacrifice effect. And then 3 Korvald, 4 Ugin's Nexus. So we're basically like a faux ramp list with a little bit of interaction. We're trying to get to 5 mana, play Ugin's Nexus. If you play Korvald, it's like a 5 mana 6/6 that draws 2 cards and takes an extra turn or something like that. And that's normally enough. Like, the extra turns you get matter a lot because Fable is like a planeswalker kind of when you get to take the extra turn. Vraska keeps ticking up. And Korvold has an effect that keeps happening, right, every turn for no mana. So these extra turns, you kind of get to take the extra turn as if there's planeswalkers in play. You're getting a lot more than just, the explore effect to draw an extra card and play an extra land.
So you've seeded throughout the deck 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, looks like 12 effects that sacrifice the Ugin's Nexus. But none of those cards are bad per se, right? The Volta Surge is fine removal. Deadly Dispute's good. Vraska is having a moment right now in Pioneer. There's a variant of the Mono Green Devotion that's just splashing for 4 copies of Vraska and positioned really well. And of course, Korvold, All-Star. We haven't gone too far out of our way to include these effects, and then we just have the 4 Ugin's Nexus that, if you draw one, you draw one, and it's a time warp.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the thought process. So jumped in the league, was quickly at 3-0. I was like, man, this list is sweet. Like, I am cruising through this league. It'd be so sweet to 5-0. Played Mono Blue Spirits. Actually drew good hands in both games, honestly. I drew really good hands in both games and just lost. It just sucks so bad that if they just draw, they never flood. It's maddening. Then I played Mono Green again, which I had beaten my first match very easily 2-0. I flooded out in the third game from way ahead. They were able to steal the last game. So only finished 3-2. Kind of a disappointing finish considering where I started. The list did feel really good though. You can tell that I'm not 100% sure on some of the numbers, like 2 Prosperous Innkeeper, 2 Sylvan Caryatid. Sometimes one was better than the other, sometimes the other would have been better. The thought process was just Prosperous Innkeeper gives me more material to sacrifice to Deadly Dispute and Vraska and Korvold. And even just having a treasure lying around when you play Korvold and then sack it for something else is really good. I also just wanted there to be more stuff to turn Fatal Push on. So I don't know what's better there. The Saheeli was sweet one time. So just so people understand, when you play Ugin's Nexus, if Saheeli's in play, you get a 1-1. You can make the 1-1 a copy of the Ugin's Nexus, and then you have to sacrifice 1. The problem is that Ugin's Nexus has text that says if a player would begin an extra turn, skip that turn. So you actually don't get to keep the real Ugin's Nexus. You have to sack that one, and then the token will become a 1-1 at the end of turn.
Oh.
Unless you have another sack effect. So I was able to do that once where I Saheeli'd, cast Ugin's Nexus, got to actually keep the real Ugin's Nexus, and then sack it to Deadly Dispute. So that's 2 turns in a row, which is just absolutely insane.
So just to make sure I understand you, you sacrifice 1 Ugin's Nexus, and that says, hey, you get an extra turn when this turn is over, and that means you have until the end of this turn to get rid of the second Ugin's Nexus.
Exactly, because at the start of your next turn, it checks if this is an extra turn, and if an Ugin's Nexus is in play, it won't let you take that extra turn. So you have to make sure that the real Ugin's Nexus is gone. So you can do that by either choosing to sacrifice it when it tries to legend rule itself, or if you have another sack effect, Vraska or Deadly Dispute or Voltage Surge or a Korvold attack, you can choose to actually keep the real Ugin's Nexus, lose the token, and then sack the Nexus itself. Then you get 2 turns.
That's so tricky. I like that.
Yeah, so I actually did that, and then I happened to draw another Nexus on one of those turns, so I took 5 turns in a row against my mono green opponent. And so, like, they're playing Vraska, they're trying to do Vraska stuff. Like, my Vraska is just so much better than them, it's not even close. Stealing my, 3-year-old Vraska tech is embarrassing. Mono green, come on. You're not even... Now, I'm not exactly sure what I would do to improve the deck. Maybe it just needs to be more all-in on ramping to Ugin's Nexus. And have more Prosperous Innkeepers and Sylvan Caryatids, and maybe not even play the Saheeli. Because what I was finding is at the end, I just want to get Ugin's Nexus in play and start taking turns. That's all I want to do. Bloodtithe Harvester is an absolutely insane card in this list. It blocks. It's a pseudo removal spell. It makes a blood, which is fine to sacrifice to Vraska. It makes a blood, which is an insane card to sacrifice to Korvold. And if you have an Ugin's Nexus to sacrifice to Korvold, you just sack the blood to just draw a card with Ugin before you loot. I mean, it's just a crazy, crazy card.
Yeah, it seems like the synergies are there. There's probably some unanswered questions in the build, right? 2 Disputes, 2 Surge, 2 Caryatid, 2 Innkeeper. I mean, I know we need a bigger sample size, but I feel like one of those has got to be better than the other.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking is there's a red-black legend that makes a treasure as well when it comes into play. That might just be better than Innkeeper.
Oh, Kalane, Reclusive Painter?
Yeah, or as a one of. There's a lot of options. I don't know that you need the Saheeli. I think I board it out in literally every game because it is so reactive. At the same time, I want to make sure I had enough fodder for Vraska. So the only thing I'm sure of is 4 Fable, 4 Vraska, 4 Ugin's Nexus, 3 Korvold, 4 Blood Tithe, and then the 8 1-mana removal spells. But after that, like, how many Voltage Surges, Deadly Disputes, Prosperous Innkeeper, Caryatid, Saheeli? Do you need 24 land if you're playing a bunch of ramp? I don't think you want all the cycling land. That was never valuable. Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways you can go with this. Maybe you want to play Tracker. That makes a bunch of permanents because we are playing some Fabled Passages. I'm open to a lot of different ideas.
You didn't miss the Fires of Invention, right? So there was no flooding issues. But did you miss Karn the Great Creator?
No, Karn sucks. Unless you're mono green, you just have infinite mana. Karn is not good. I do not believe that it's very good at all. It happens to be good against me because I have a shit ton of treasures in play, but against everybody else. Like, mono green played Karn against me multiple times. I just attacked it with Blood Tithe Harvester and it died. Like, what are we doing here?
That's a little spoiler from the Dominaria United story that came out. Karn's going through a rough time.
So anyway, I guess as a proof of concept, this was very real. I felt heavily favored against green. I did not play the real blue-red list, but against prowess, I went 2-0. So it's, we're well suited against aggro. And again, we're playing a 5-mana card that cannot be killed by 4 damage. So that inherently makes you better in the mid-range matchups. You're just going to dominate red-black. But then can you beat spirits? Probably need to dedicate multiple sideboard slots to do so. Other than that, it felt really good.
Yeah, like what is your all-time record against any flavor of spirits is like 2-30 at this point.
Yeah, I'd say my mono blue spirits record is way, way worse. Because again, it's really hard for them to stop Korvold in Bant because everything stops at 4. So like resolving Korvold just beats Bant spirits. That's the thing that's maddening. Cards that are good against blue spirits are not good against Bant spirits and vice versa. So it's like you have these two flavors of spirits that like can't be beaten by the same cards.
So we'll just never beat a spirits deck. This is known. This is established at this point.
Casting 5-mana spells against Spell Queller is awesome. Like you're going to win a game where you cast Korvold in game 1 against Spell Queller, but you'll never resolve Korvold against mono blue. So it's like,
yeah.
It's stupid. I hate spirits. At the same time, they're a good police. Like, they're really, really, really good against blue-white and Lotus Field. So they serve an important role. The fact that they're good against me, it's like, you can't yuck somebody else's yum.
Yeah, and whatever happens, at least we beat Jund. That's the running theme over 3 years of Faithless Brewing. We beat Jund.
We just absolutely leave a smoldering crater. And then those are always the people that rant. Like, oh man, I got beat by this. It's like, yep, you got smoked by it. It wasn't close.
All right, David. Well, always a pleasure to hear how these brews perform on the field of battle when we actually take them out to play.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I mean, these are all shells that nobody's playing with, right? So there's still a lot of work to be done in Pioneer. I don't think this format is solved at all. I have very good records, again, not counting spirits, but against a bunch of other decks. I think I'm like 8-2 against mono green in my last 10 matches. I've been playing a bunch of different decks that are not even main decking Graveyard Hate that can beat blue red. So yeah, you don't have to just play tier 1 decks in Pioneer to have success. I guess that's the main point. I'm playing, main deck for Ugin's Nexus. There's a lot of stuff you can do in this format if you make a few allowances.
Well said. All right, so I think that's going to do it for us for today. Next week, we are going to be diving into Dominaria United spoilers. Finally, looking forward to that, and we'll see you next time.
All right, take care, sir.
Deck lists for this episode can be found at our homepage, faithlessbrewing.com. And tune in next time for part 1 of our Dominaria United full set review. Support for this podcast is provided by brewers like you. Join the Faithless family and help support the show at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing for Discord access, bonus content, and more. That's all for today. Stay safe and we'll see you next time.